Welcome to this quick dive into the Come Follow Me lesson for DNC 109. See the link in the description for the full podcast on DNC 109-110. Brought to you by the Speak Peace to My Soul channel.
So when we talk about the incredible blessings we get through Temple Covenants, we've got to start at the beginning. Where did the power for all of this even come from? Well, it all goes back to the Kirtland Temple and the restoration of essential priesthood keys. This history isn't just a story. It's the very foundation of the spiritual power we can tap into today.
You know, President Nelson really helps us grasp how huge this was. He says the significance cannot be overstated, and he's right. What happened in Kirtland was absolutely monumental. It wasn't just about dedicating a building. It was about the heavens opening up to restore the authority needed to connect us, our families, to God forever.
Just try to imagine being there on that one day, April 3rd, 1836. First, the Savior himself appears and accepts the temple. And if that wasn't enough, he's followed by this incredible succession of ancient prophets, Moses, Elias, and Elijah, each one appearing to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery to restore a specific and totally crucial set of priesthood keys.
So what did these keys actually do? President Nelson broke it down for us. Moses, he brought back the keys for the gathering of Israel. That's all about missionary work and the work we do for our ancestors. Then Elias came with the keys of the gospel of Abraham, which unlocks the promise that literally all nations can be blessed. And finally, Elijah restored the sealing power, that sacred authority to bind on earth and have it be bound in heaven.
Let's just pause on this for a second. Really think about it personally. If those keys had never been restored, what would be missing from your life? What ordinances, what promises, what eternal connections just wouldn't exist for you?
Well, President Nelson gives us the powerful answer. Without these keys, we couldn't be endowed with power from on high. We couldn't be sealed to our families for eternity. The church would still be a wonderful organization that teaches good things, but it couldn't provide the ordinances that actually allow us to return to God. These keys, they really do change everything about our eternal potential.
Okay, so with that authority as our foundation, let's turn to Doctrine and Covenants 109. This isn't just a historical prayer from the Kirtland Temple dedication. It's really a catalog of promises, blessings that are available to you and me right now.
I love how President Nelson frames this. He calls it a tutorial. It's like a divine guide given through Joseph Smith that teaches us how to draw strength from the temple to deal with the specific challenges of our day. It's so relevant.
This description from verse 16, it's so much more than just beautiful language, isn't it? It's a series of promises about what we can find and who we can become inside the temple. It's a place where we can truly connect with God, learn from Him, and feel His glory. And this has a very real personal impact. President Nelson teaches that as we make time to serve and worship in the temple, we can expect these specific blessings to flow into our lives. Answers to our prayers, personal revelation, more faith, more strength, comfort, and this increased ability to see things from an eternal perspective, to think celestial. Let's just focus on a few of these incredible promises from the prayer itself. First, the promise to receive a fullness of the Holy Ghost. Just pause and think about what that means for your life. To have the heavens open and truth just pour into your heart and mind.
Then there's this deeply comforting promise of help and protection, that God's angels can have charge over us. What an incredible thought. That as we keep our covenants, we don't have to face life's challenges alone. We can have heavenly help.
And flowing right from that is this promise of divine protection. Those who faithfully take the name of Christ upon themselves in the temple are promised that wickedness will not in the end win. It's a promise of spiritual safety and the power to overcome whatever opposition we face.
Now, all of this brings us to a really powerful modern-day parallel. President Nelson used the massive renovation of the Salt Lake Temple to teach us something vital about our own lives, about the need to reinforce our own spiritual foundations. He explained that just like that historic temple's foundation needed to be strengthened to withstand earthquakes and just the test of time, we too need to take what he called extraordinary measures to strengthen our own personal spiritual foundations.
The parallel is perfect, right? Just as the temple's physical foundation had become vulnerable, our spiritual foundations can become vulnerable to all the pressures and craziness of our day. The solution is the same for both: reinforcement. For us, that means building our lives firmly on the rock of our Redeemer, Jesus Christ, with the temple right at the center of it all.
So, this naturally leads to a moment of personal reflection. President Nelson is basically asking each of us, how firm is your foundation? What reinforcements does your testimony, your faith, your understanding of the gospel need right now?
And that reflection leads us directly to action. It's not just about thinking, it's about doing. We can actively strengthen our spiritual foundations by choosing to live our temple covenants more intentionally every single day. President Nelson gave really specific, loving counsel, pleas really, to different groups. He urged young adults to seek a companion they can be sealed to. He pleaded with married couples not yet sealed to take that step. He urged single members not to wait for marriage to get endowed and access that priesthood power. And he pleaded with all of us to continually seek a deeper understanding of our covenants.
And here it is. This is the capstone promise that ties everything together. Just like the renovated Salt Lake Temple will be the safest place in an earthquake, President Nelson promises that when the spiritual earthquakes happen in our lives, and they will, the safest place to be is living inside our temple covenants. That is where we find true spiritual security and peace.
So, let's start with a really powerful story from President Russell M. Nelson. In his October 2021 General Conference talk, he shared an experience he had while checking on the huge renovations happening at the Salt Lake Temple. He said that because of this project, that beloved hymn, How Firm a Foundation, really took on a whole new meaning for him and his wife, Wendy.
So picture this. He's actually there, on site, standing underneath where the garden room used to be, looking right at the temple's original foundation. And, while he was just marveling at the incredible work of the pioneers, he also saw the effects of time. He could see the erosion and the gaps that had formed in the old stonework. You could tell that after more than a century, it needed some help.
But then he talked about what's happening now, and he was just blown away by the work of today's engineers. The way he described it, this astonishing process of reinforcing that original foundation, making it strong enough to handle earthquakes, corrosion, high winds, everything. He explained this sacred temple is being given a foundation that, as he said, can and will stand the test of time.
And this is where it gets really personal for all of us. This whole physical renovation, well, it's a perfect parallel for building a foundation for our own faith. Think about it. Just like that amazing, historic temple became a little vulnerable over the years, our own spiritual foundations can too. President Nelson taught that we're living in a time with, as he put it, forthcoming perils and pressures, and even unique anxieties. And all those things can kind of start to chip away at our own spiritual footings if we're not careful. And this is where he got really serious, in a very loving way. He said, and this is a quote you've probably heard, "Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures." What he's saying is, right now is the time for each of us to implement what he called extraordinary measures to make sure our personal spiritual foundations are strong. And then he turned it right back to us. He asked this really direct question, and it's something worth sitting with for a minute. He asked, how firm is your foundation, and what reinforcements to your testimony and understanding of the gospel are needed? So, okay, where do we even start? Where's the blueprint for building a foundation that strong? Well, President Nelson was crystal clear. The blueprint is found in the temple and the blessings of the Lord's house. And this ties in perfectly with this week's Come Follow Me lesson, which takes us right to section 109 of the Doctrine Covenants. Now, this section is the actual dedicatory prayer of the Kirtland Temple. And even though that temple was a bit different from the ones we have today, the promises and blessings revealed in that prayer, they are absolutely for us, right now in our temples.
The lesson really encourages us to look at some key verses here. And what do we find? We find promises that in the temple, the Lord can actually manifest himself to us, that we can feel his power. And, maybe most importantly for our day-to-day lives, that we can leave the temple armed with his power, ready for whatever the world throws at us. I mean, that's exactly the kind of reinforcement we're talking about, right?
Okay, so let's get practical. What are these extraordinary measures that President Nelson talked about? Let's look at how we can strengthen our own foundations. He laid out 4 pleas from a prophet. First, he pleaded with young adults to find a companion they can be sealed to, saying it will make all the difference. Second, for married couples who aren't sealed yet, he urged them to take those steps. Third, he encouraged single adults not to put off getting their own endowment. And fourth, for every single one of us who has made covenants, his plea was to prayerfully and consistently work to really understand what they mean. He was also really understanding. He knows that for some of us, the temple might not yet feel like that place of refuge. And his advice was beautiful. He said, if you don't yet love to attend the temple, go more often, not less.
Let the Lord, through His Spirit, teach and inspire you there. He promised that over time, it will become a place of safety, solace, and revelation for us.
And the promises that come with really digging in and trying to understand our covenants are just incredible. Spiritual doors will open, he said. He promised that we'll learn how to part the veil between heaven and earth, how to ask for God's angels to attend us, and how to get clearer direction from heaven. Wow.
This all brings us right back to where we started, with that temple foundation, and it leads to the ultimate promise, the safest place to be.
So President Nelson made this really stunning point. He said that when all those renovations are done, the absolute safest place to be during an earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley will be inside that temple. And then he made the connection for us. Likewise, he taught, whenever any kind of upheaval occurs in your life, the safest place to be spiritually is living inside your temple covenants.
And that's really the heart of it all, isn't it? When our spiritual foundation is built on Jesus Christ, through the covenants we make in His house, we don't have to be afraid. If we're true to those covenants, we will be strengthened by His power. And when those spiritual earthquakes happen, and they will, we'll be able to stand strong.
So, as we wrap up, we've seen how the power we access in the temple flows directly from priesthood keys restored way back in Kirtland. We've seen that the amazing promises in Doctrine and Covenants 109 are absolutely for us today. And we've been invited by a living prophet to strengthen our spiritual foundations by centering our lives on Jesus Christ and our temple covenants. As you think about all of this, maybe consider this final question. What promise or invitation from the Scriptures or from a living prophet stood out to you the most today?